Welcome back to Empires of the Future. Excited to get together today with Jackson and talk about kind of maybe a little bit more laid back of a topic. Get into something not super heavy. You and I have talked about the need to every now and then have a little bit more laid back podcast, something a little more fun, a little more lighthearted. I think hopefully still valuable, still worthwhile.
Yeah.
We've done a few sort of laid back ones. We talked about the iPod one time and its demise, its death. We talked about Marvel movies and their significance and some themes seen throughout. Today we're going to talk about leisure. We're going to talk about hobbies and how they matter and why they matter, or if they matter.
Sure.
Maybe that is the question that some people haven't really considered, is as to whether or not leisure matters, hobbies matter. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. But in the meantime, Jackson, how you been since we've been together last?
Oh, really good. It's cold. It is so cold right now. And people always say, well, I like the cold because you can put on more layers. I don't seem to be able to put on enough layers. I am, for those who are hearing, I am wearing 4 layers today. I still manage to be cold. But I mean, what is it, like 30 out right now? It was 9, I think, yesterday. It's not good from that standpoint. So I don't like being cold, and I've been cold. And so that's been rough, but otherwise doing great. How about you?
Doing good. Yeah, Sunday was rough. Sunday was... the high for that day was 6 degrees, 4 degrees, something like that.
Yeah.
It was really cold. And our church is an old building that's not very efficient. Basically, whatever heat we can muster escapes pretty quickly through the old windows and things like that. And I sort of sent out a heads up to everyone saying, hey, like, the sanctuary will be colder this week. Come prepared. But it was 59 degrees in our sanctuary, which is kind of a cold sanctuary.
It is.
But is great compared to what it was outside. But it was a funny thing to preach to people all bundled up in their like coats and scarves and everything, as everyone was. But still had a good turnout though, which I was pleased by. And we even had an evening service that day and had a remarkably good turnout for that. Mm-hmm. So that was cool. But yeah, it's been cold. 30 degrees, which is what it is right now, roughly. It feels luxurious compared to what it has been the past couple days. Yeah, it's been awful. But you want to know something? Well, I'll get into it later because it does relate to our topic at hand.
Okay.
But yeah. So I'm glad you're doing well. I'm doing well also. I've had a lot of things sort of keeping me busy this week, and it's gotten me thinking about leisure and leisure time, because I find myself in a busy season of life where I don't always have the time to do the fun things that I want to do. Mm-hmm. Don't always find that I have the time for the hobbies that I like to enjoy. And that got me thinking, and so we're going to talk a little bit today about the usefulness in hobbies and in time off and leisure and how it matters, why it matters, what's the best way to use it, maybe. I think we can even get into that a little bit. I want to start by maybe asking you, I've got 3 in my head. I'd like to hear what your top 3 sort of leisure activities are. We'll take them one at a time, though. If you were to say, like, what is your, we'll start from the third. What is your third favorite leisure activity?
All right. I am a guy who likes hobbies, so I had to think a minute when I ranked them. And what came to me, an enduring one that I ended up putting at number 3, is running. And before anybody goes, oh, that's ridiculous. For me, running came and filled a place in my life that I'm not particularly outdoorsy, but I really like to be outdoorsy and running. I really value thinking clearly, just for instance. And when I'm running, I think more clearly than almost any other reliable time. It's comparable to if I know nobody's going to be coming in my office. If I was at the church at like 10 o'clock on a Friday night, when I know nobody's going to be stopping in, it's comparable to that sometimes.
Yeah.
And so running has a value as a thing that, well, and then obviously too, you want to do something to stay physically fit. It just covers so many bases. And so number 3 ends up being that. Yeah.
Yeah. And during this season, right, you're probably not out running as much since it's been so cold. Do you find that you miss it during the cold weather, the
I
cold
really
months?
do, to the extent that the sort of the period of life that we're coming out of. When I lived next door to the church, it was one of those amazing things that happens that I had access to a track that was in the same complex where I lived. I mean, I remember when we ran there last year, I was going, okay, how does this happen that I'm sort of like a billionaire from a standpoint of I at 6 a.m. on Monday, I have a personal track because there's nobody else going to be trying to use that.
Yeah.
Just like maybe a Bill Gates could have, or, and it just happens that way. And so, yes, I used it all the time, even though 17 laps is a mile and it's not ideal, to say the least. That period of when I lived here on campus for 9 years, where we are right now, in another different house, it was really just in the wintertime particularly. And the rotation, as you know, that we were on was we would take off always. We'd run the half marathon right there the first Saturday in October when it typically was. Take off the rest of October, take off November, usually take off most of December, if not all. But then by January, we would always, every group that we had would always kind of be saying, hey, it's January, what are we doing? We got to be doing something. And we did. And for a while back at the old Y, we met there, but then that was a period, that was where that hobby fit.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think... I don't know that I would put running in my top 3, but it's definitely on my list of enjoyable leisure activity when the weather is nice.
Yep.
As we've sort of discussed here. Now, a lot of people hear that and they're going to say that's not a leisure activity. Leisure, they think relaxation, they think resting, they think recharging. How would you sort of explain that to someone who comes with that objection and says that doesn't count as leisure because you're not relaxing, you're not recharging, you're active. How does that compute?
Yeah, and all I can say about that is I am not like none of my closest friends would say, oh yeah, he's just such a driven person. But I look at life and I go, I want to accomplish something pretty quickly every day. The work hard, play hard makes sense to me. That's how I've always kind of processed life. And so to get up in the morning and do something and then to have a sense of accomplishment, that sense of purpose has been there for me. And so it fills that in addition to just the physical mode, something I fell into. And this is what hobbies, it's a mysterious thing in your life that you try something and it fits with you. And sometimes you try something and it doesn't fit with you.
Yeah,
I can't explain it in detail, but man, we all know when certain things fit with us, right?
Yeah. I think, 100% we know. And a lot of people might be listening and saying, running doesn't fit.
Right, yeah. And that's easy because just as you and I, even when we were downstairs kind of talking about, okay, should we just do this, talk about hobbies today? Because we were going to do something different and then we were kind of making plans and then decided to just do this. You talked out loud about saying your top 3 hobbies.
Yeah.
And you had to kind of put a different thing in place.
Yep.
And so what's your number 3?
So my number 3 spot is movies.
Yeah.
And you could maybe add in television to that to a certain degree, but I've always been a bit of a movie buff. I enjoy stories with a little bit of longevity to them. They are more of a time commitment than a show, but I've always been one that I can sit down and watch part of a movie and then pick it back up later and usually can stay pretty engaged with it even still. I love, the stories, things like that. Actually, I remember when I first watched Harry Potter, I was not into Harry Potter. I thought it sounded dumb. It's about some little boy who's a wizard. Just thought it was weird. And then my wife was like, no, they're actually really good movies. I think you should try them. And we watched the first one and I was like, all right, you got me.
Yep.
Because it was a story that was an adventure. It was engaging. There was, all these different aspects to it. So I would say movies, I put number 3 at my list. Some people would probably, if we could lay out like my days someone were to inspect how I've spent my time for the past month, they would probably say movies should be closer to number 1 than my other 2 hobbies. But I say that just because my other 2 are not hobbies that are necessarily easy to just right now, whenever you want, jump into. Mm-hmm. With movies, you can, I've got an extra hour this evening. with nothing planned, I can just put in a movie. It was just different than some leisure activities, which maybe require certain kinds of weather, even running. Like, I mean, I guess you can run regardless of anything else, but typically you're not going to go out and leisurely run in the rain or in the sleet or the ice or even like the 100-degree temperatures and things like that. So, so movies is one of those things you can just kick into and go for it. I know it's one of those leisure activities though that if there is one on my list that I'm more prone to maybe overindulgence, because that is an aspect of the conversation, is overindulgence in leisure, which often leads people to conclude that leisure in general are not helpful, are not good, because we oftentimes are quick to overindulge. But that would be the one I'm most prone to. But one that I also find for me and my wife, we enjoy. Yeah, it's a good way to relax that we can both do together and both enjoy kind of equally. We don't always both enjoy the same other hobbies, but it's one that we sort of make into a communal thing as well. Yeah. That's a part of why I'm really sad about the fact that movie theaters are going away. Yeah. We've lamented this maybe once before on the podcast, but movie theaters are kind of a thing of the past, almost. Not quite. Although there are some sort of changes coming in streaming, and there seems to be a pendulum swing. Maybe, I'm holding out hope, maybe movie theaters and movies in general will make a bit of a comeback. But so movies sort of what I've put into my number 3 slot. Okay, so there's number 3 for me. Yeah. Number 3 for you. What would you say is number 2?
All right. Number 2 for me is playing music. And this one's funny because I'm not one of those people who learned instruments as a kid. I learned instruments starting at 19, basically. And so I play 3 instruments, the guitar, the hammer dulcimer, and I can chord on a piano, say it like that. And it only took me 20 years to be able to do that. But it is just such a joy because it is one thing to really love music. It is a next level experience to have music coming through you, even singing, but then it is another level experience to have music coming through you singing and playing. Mm-hmm. And so it is such an enjoyable sort of experience. And one now that I guess I'm, over 20 years in. And so to summarize this one, in my 20s, I bought too many musical instruments because I liked them a lot and because I had friends who liked music and playing music, and we tried them, and then you end up carrying them, and they take up so much space. So I own, how many instruments do I officially own right now? Oh, probably something like 8.
That's not as high as I thought you were going to say.
Oh, goodness, yeah, and I've worked to get down to 8.
Yeah. Do you still have the djembe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Yeah. Or was that one of those when you were in your 20s buying all the instruments you could?
That one actually 10, 12 years ago, I was at a yard sale on the west side and found a djembe for $35. A djembe is a hand drum. This probably came from Guitar Center and probably cost $120 or maybe $180. But to find it at a yard sale, I can tell you this: I've seen one other djembe in all of the years that I've been yard selling here in Evansville since then, and someone had jabbed a knife through the top of it about 30 times. So I didn't buy that one.
Yeah, I guess not. Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's what I was going to side note. But what are some of the, if you were to sort of put a description on what the experience is of playing music? You've talked a little bit about the music coming through you, but what sort of feelings? How do you find it to be relaxing and leisurely as you're doing it?
Right, and and that is funny because if I compare it to running is a very consistent sort of experience. Mm-hmm. What it does for you, what it feels like. I mean, yet the only thing that's different about it is what sort of surface you're running on, what the temperature is outside, and who you're with, these sorts of things. But music can be about so many different kinds of things and can have something different to say about those kinds of things. And so what music gives you is a means to communicate and to receive messages, thoughts, and to process all kinds of different things. And so wow, the depth of it, how it can affect you emotionally, is one of the takeaways that I have from it. Great question.
Yeah.
It's hard to even answer that question.
Yeah, because I think you're doing a good job of doing it, because it does, when you compare it to the first one you've mentioned, running, they are two totally different experiences, because I doubt you're very much getting too much emotional from running. There's maybe a communal aspect of, you're with friends oftentimes when you run. I know we enjoy one another a lot, and perhaps you can gain some certain emotions from that, but rarely are you going to be drawn to tears from the act of running.
Right. We've more commonly had the experience of drawing each other to fight.
Yes. Yeah. Fighting is more likely with running.
And that can happen with music as well. I will say I've had both experiences.
Oh, yeah. I've never had it with music, but I believe you that it exists. But yeah, it's something that maybe certainly on a much more, on an emotional level, it sort of hits different than other forms of leisure like running. So that's really good. What kind of music do you tend to enjoy to play the most?
Right. So acoustic music, really guitar-driven, sorts of rhythm-driven music is what I grew up with. I grew up listening to Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, Van Halen, rock to pop and those sorts of things. And so that has carried on. As you know, Christian music has parallels, that there's a Christian artist that is comparable to most sort of secular artists. And so that's still where I am. If I had to name a genre that is sort of just like, okay, if this person is really that genre, folk rock is the central sort of genre that catches me, but R&B catches me. Most pop music I like, even if the lyrics are absolutely ridiculous, as often they are, still I can go, it's got a nice beat,
That's right.
So yeah.
Is there any kind of music that you do not like and will pretty much never play?
Yes. I mean, without a doubt, there's so much music. So that I value lots and lots and lots of music. And my valuing of music, I can see that different kinds of people can like lots of different kinds of music. I think some music is poorly executed, poorly placed. Something like emo or screamo. I went through a very angry phase, but getting to where some of this stuff is not helpful, even if you want to get me down and say, what do you mean? I mean, I think it's bad for people. Just because some music helps people just express absolutely like wrath, like anger beyond what is reasonable. Music is so powerful. And one of the strange ways I've learned even more about music work is being in student ministry for so long. I've watched as people have loved music in a variety of ways, but technology has come to the point that people can listen to music all day long, and it can be used. I mean, you see young people use it to help them maintain their moods and to make them feel better and make them, and it's just kind of like, well, then it's a crutch. You have to be careful in these sort of things. And so loving and enjoying music, like all the other things we're going to mention, I am sure, well, everything has its limits. I mean, one biblical principle we haven't alluded to yet is that labor produces leisure. That's something you can see God established in the Old Testament, something that carries on through the New Testament, in the laws, but even you don't have to get to the law beyond Genesis 1 and 2, where God says, this is 6 days you'll work, but the seventh day you should rest. And that carries through things like what things are really weird to us, like the year of Jubilee, where look, every 49 years, you're going to take a whole year off. I mean, think about that might, in that time, you might have somebody who would die before they ever experienced a year of Jubilee. But basically, I think the way it would work is most people would say, yeah, you get one of these in your lifetime. Yeah. But it's a whole year of leisure. And so that's my thinking about, yes, if it's number two, there is only one thing that I do like more than it, or something I've had a more long-standing. But music is deep for me. It's
it doesn't necessarily mean that you like the other thing more. It just means if you were to have to put it in the number one slot, it's tough.
It is.
It's tough to put them in a number
I've had
one,
a
number
lot
two,
of hobbies, and they have warred against each other for my time, as I think you were kind of sort of referencing a minute ago. The problem, especially I think for men, is hobbies kind of call to you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I would say for my number 2, I would put camping on the list of leisure activities. There is just something about getting out into the woods, enjoying both the beauty of nature and what God has created, but also there's and maybe this comes back to being a man as well. Everything about camping, by and large, is like it just gets right at my sort of manly desires and tendencies of like creating fire. That's just a really, masculine sort of thing. Even setting up a tent, it's building, it's construction. When you're camping, whether it be you're hiking, you're fishing, whatever the case might be, producing, in a sense, all of it just, I think, very directly sort of scratches an itch that I have, and I think probably a lot of men have. Yeah. Women enjoy camping too. Don't act like they don't, but I do think, I think reality sort of points to the truth that men tend to be more drawn to camping and those kinds of things. Roughing it. I mean, we call it roughing it, which as men we think I could be on a survival show. I think you get that sense. Even I do when I go camping. I'm like, man.
Yeah,
what I do?
I can tell you that you and I have been camping together, but if I had to make a master list of my top, 150 hobbies, camping might be like number 148 or something, if I'm guessing. But even that, yes, I have, and I would be on a survival type show if it were Survivor, because that's my favorite show of all of those shows. And because. Man, it's hard to summarize that, but there is a web of activities that you'll do, but the simplicity of it, I think, is what appeals to me, that it's like, look, if you want to ask me, could I build a house? Oh, man, I'd go to the classes, and then I'd answer that question after that. But can I put up a tent? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, can you build a fire? Yeah. You want to install heat into your house? Again, I'd have to go to the classes. I'm that kind of learner, right? You got to explain it all to me ahead of time. The people who've always taken me like, here, just do this. I'm like, no, I'm not that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so, but the simplicity of all of that stuff, that it's just, you can look at somebody doing it and go, okay, I see the basics of it.
Because it's like, this ain't got to last me for 10 years. Right. It's got to last me for the next couple nights.
Right.
And that's it, But even then, there is and I do take a certain amount of pride in like, being able to set up camp in such a way that it's like everything and everyone is going to stay dry and warm and comfortable as much as possible. I'm going to be able to cook whatever I want over this fire, whether it be peach cobbler or a good steak. All these kinds of things. Just I don't know. It's very much like scratching an itch. And I'll usually come back from a camping trip and be tired in a sense. Yeah. Because I don't sleep the best. No one does when they're camping. But at the same time, and my wife will attest to this, I'll come back from a men's camping trip and just be filled with energy and rejuvenated and sort of, I don't know, brought back to life to a certain degree, which I think gets at a little bit of what we were talking about as well with running. And the point is that while things like camping and running, they do take energy. So it's not, when we think about leisure being a recharging of your batteries, some would look at those things and say that's an expending of your batteries, that's an expending of it. And in a sense it is. It does take effort, it does take energy, but I think for your spirit, for your demeanor, for your all these kinds of things, your mood, it lifts those. Even while it does maybe take a little bit of your energy, it lifts these other areas and builds them up, so that after you run 5 miles, you might be tired, right? But at the same time, you can come back from that feeling rejuvenated, and even to a certain degree rested after that, having gotten your mind cleared, having reaped the benefits of that sort of thing. Similar with camping too. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of rest is unique among every category you'll run into in the Bible, that we all know basic ideas about what rest is, but I'm thinking about, the book of Hebrews, that what is promised to all of us is a Sabbath rest for God's people, that none of us have actually ever rested in the deepest sense, because we live in a broken world, and so you can never be free from anxiety, really. Yeah. You live in a broken world, and so you have to decide to work on the things that you believe you ought to do, and then periodically just go, I can't do it all. God, I'm going to have to trust you that you'll take care of some of these things. And I'm coming back, but I got to rest. And that, so it is, the rest that we do is a pale shadow of what we will one day have.
Yeah.
But it's built in that even now, I mean, I find that Christians are confused about, according to a general structure, Saturday ought to be considered your day you rest. I find a lot of Christians think it ought to be Sunday, which is not, you're just unclear about what the general pattern. And in part, that's because, yes, Jesus has fulfilled the law. And Jesus even says, hey, look, the reason I could do a little bit of work on that day, Pharisees, is God didn't make the Sabbath and then say, all right, man, look up to the Sabbath. Never break the Sabbath. He made the Sabbath because he knew you would be tired. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. So you'll be tired, and you need to be able then to relax. And for me, the pattern then is, if I want to accomplish things, I do it morning. The longer the day goes, the more I get towards quitting time. My mind, and even more so my heart, just goes, all right, let's lean more towards rest and push ourselves and then call it a day and go do something that is relaxing. Mm-hmm. And so that leads all the way to, I assess in general on a weekly basis, okay, Saturday's there on purpose. And if I've had a particularly stressful, hardworking week, Saturday will be even more so. I've accidentally, I think, but again, it's just because I liked it so much. I've accidentally built that into my kids' lives. Yeah. One of my favorite things from when I was a kid was Saturday morning cartoons. I looked forward so to that. And when my kids got old enough to understand what was going on, I talked to them about Saturday morning cartoons as a way to head off how much screen time they want and how, I mean, again, to see, when you see the pattern in the Bible, you go, okay, when they keep asking about, I want to watch something else, I go, well, you can watch that on Saturday morning. That's when the big time's coming. That's when, after you control yourself, that's time to let yourself go a little bit. Yeah. And they love it, needless to say. Yeah. Saturday morning cartoons look different because now we're in the age of you pick everything and it's streaming and all of this. I had to get up at I get up at 7 every Saturday morning because that's when the cartoons started as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. You almost entered us into a discussion on Sabbatarianism there for a moment. I was like, oh, man, where are we going here?
Yeah.
And maybe that's a podcast for another day. We can talk about that. But, I think everything you said about leisure and all of that is good and right. I don't think there's any need to recap it. I would just like to hear your, Jackson, number one. Okay, if you were to say, what's your favorite form of leisure, favorite hobby, what would that be?
Yeah, it's video games. Video games, which when I was a kid, still, most adults would have said these things are dumb and they're probably going to be gone. I hope they will anyway. And then meanwhile, video games are now on every phone, on every computer, on walls, on screens, on even this is my number one hobby, and I am dismayed that they are in as many places as they are. Yeah. I mean, when I pull in my hometown or when I drive somewhere on the Lord Expressway here and I see in a store window video gaming, I go, what? Oh, wait, video gaming means gambling. Yeah. And this is, everywhere. And so that's there, but video games fell into them. In some ways, I sort of grew up with them because I was born in 1980, and so there was Atari 2600, Intellivision, Magnavox Odyssey, some very basic systems, but they've gotten so much more complicated, so much more engaging. And so, yes, I mean, I like strategy video games. I like, I like role-playing video games. I like almost every kind of video game except sports games. Yeah. Yeah. It's challenging to manage.
Yeah. And you have a wide collection that you've collected over the years too, based on all of that. And that's one that, while you and I have different levels of like love for the hobby, I certainly am not without my understanding of where you're coming from. Yeah. And even though it's maybe not communal in the sense of like going out to a club or whatever, there is a communal aspect to gaming in a few different ways.
Yeah.
One is we can all remember growing up with friends, family, cousins, and whenever like what was the first system to have 4 controllers, like the N64, something like that. Man, that was a breakthrough, wasn't it? Where like more than 2 people could play at once. You could all 4 play and have this kind of thing. And even now with online gaming, if I'm not mistaken, you've got some good friends that you met online and developed relationships with from gaming.
Right.
I know the same is true with my brother, that he's met people online that they just literally they started to get to know one another and develop their relationship online through video games. And that's pretty cool. I mean, maybe an underrated aspect of video gaming that we miss out on. And once again, we hear something like video games, kind of like movies. And I think that is one that oftentimes people will hear and have an opinion on because their only sort of experience with those things is overindulgence. Because certainly like movies, video games is one of those things that is easy to just pick right up, start doing any time throughout the day. No certain weather is permitted. All you need is electricity, and you can do it anytime. And so the threat for overindulgence is there, but that doesn't mean just because the threat is there or because overindulgence is common, that it in and of itself is a bad thing or a waste of time. Yeah. I will oftentimes hear people say that about something like video games, that it's a waste of time. And the answer is, well, I guess it depends on what your goal is with it. Right. If your goal is to escape your obligations, then it is a waste of time. But you can point to almost every single person out there who would say video games are a waste of time and say, okay, what are some things that you spend your leisure time on? Do you work on your vintage car in your garage? Well, maybe we could say that's a waste of time. Do you, spend a ton of time perfecting your gardens and your flower beds? Some people would say that's a waste of time. Right. And so I think video games is one of those that unfortunately has maybe even among Christians has gotten a bit of a stigma for being a waste of time or having no value. But I think it's a perfectly valid means of leisure and relaxation. And in fact, it does engage your mind quite a bit. More than some other leisure activities do. So it's a good thing. You've named kind of one on both ends of the spectrum. Running, which is fully engaging sort of the physical aspect. It's not absent of the mind, but kind of. I mean, you can zone out when you're running pretty good. I know I can. And then gaming, which especially you're a strategy game guy. Yes. I am so bad at those strategy type games. And I recently played some with my brother and my uncle. It's called Empire Earth. Okay, so we played Empire Earth, where you sort of build up through the various levels of civilization. And this always happens to me, where my brother and my uncle, who are very good at the game, they end up like with mechanical warriors and tanks and lasers, and I'm like horseback with a bow and arrow or a slingshot coming after the enemies. Is goofy, but yeah, I've just rambled now about video games. It's not even one of my things, but
are they 148 on your list? Video games?
Ooh. Probably. They would be low. No, probably not that low. But certainly.
Are they after 100?
Oh gosh. I don't think I have that many hobbies. They would have to be higher than that, but they're not above 50, I'll tell you that. They're after 50. But I enjoy them. Like I said, sure. I'll still play every now and then, but I literally, this is not an exaggeration. I will probably play, and this goes for any kind of video game. I'll play a video game maybe twice a year, and that's maybe. Okay. But I enjoy them, especially vintage games. Like if I'm going to play something, it's going to be like, I'm going to break out my Nintendo 64 or my Sega Genesis or something that I played when I was a kid. Sure. Play that for a little while. But
okay, what's your number one?
My number one would have to be disc golf. Yeah. Anyone who knows me very well would know that is the thing that I talk about a lot, that I'm into.
Now, and just for those listening, disc golf. Some people, hobbies are so hard now because there's so many, and it's continued to grow in popularity, but some people might not know what disc golf is.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, disc golf is like ball golf in that you are trying to take a disc and make it into a basket, which is the hole, quote unquote. from the tee, and you're trying to make it in as few throws as possible.
Sure.
So like golf, it's got drivers, it's got mid-range discs, it's got putters.
Yep.
These are all different shapes and kinds of discs. And yeah, like golf, you're just trying to make it in as few strokes as possible. You've got a par that you're trying to beat, get a birdie or whatever. Yeah, and unlike golf, though, it's a very cheap and easy sport to get into. The discs, you can literally play disc golf with one disc. And you can get one disc for less than $10 easily. Yep. You get a collection of 4 or 5 discs together. You got enough to do just about everything you need to do. And by and large, across the country, courses are completely free to play.
Right.
Unlike ball golf, I don't think free ball golf exists. But there's hardly a course. There are courses. I'm not going to say they're not, but most courses are free to play disc golf at. Yeah. Because it's just the nature of the sport. It doesn't require as much maintenance. I mean, you can play disc golf in long grass, and that's fine. It doesn't. The greens don't have to be trimmed down to a couple millimeters in height and all of this kind of stuff. But so a lot of those things contribute to make it sort of part of why it's my favorite hobby is that it's dirt cheap. We have, most people don't know this, here in Evansville, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got like 8 courses either in Evansville or like just within like a 20-minute drive.
And some are 9 holes, some are 18, right?
Yeah, well, most of them are 18. The only 9-hole one is the one out at First Christian Church.
Okay.
But other than that, they're all 18. We have that many 18-hole courses between Evansville, Newburgh, Henderson, Darmstadt, Hobstadt. Yeah. We've got a lot of courses around town. So, it's a great thing to do. It's also really kind of laid back. But also, and part of why I do enjoy it is because it is one of those kinds of things that you don't have to be good, but you also, if you choose to put in a little bit of time and work on form and sort of develop some disciplines, you can actually really see improvements and get better at the sport. So it's not only just a means to sort of veg out, like some leisure things I enjoy. Right. It is also a challenge. Yep. There's a challenge involved. There's goals involved. There's discipline involved, which it might not seem it, but oftentimes makes the leisure activity and the hobby more enjoyable. Right. If there's no challenge involved, if there's no skill being developed, then I think that's what will always keep television or movies out of the top slot for me.
Yeah, sure.
A hobby that involves a skill, that involves discipline and abilities and things like that will sort of take the cake for me. Because I think a part of why is because it's an outlet for using the creativity, even for using the skills that God has given us, beyond just maybe what we do for vocation. Mm-hmm. So like my disc golf abilities, quote unquote, whatever they might be, they don't come in very handy as a real estate agent or as a pastor. Mm-hmm. They really don't. Other than occasionally I'll use a disc golf analogy in a sermon. Sure. But that's about it. Yep. But they are still sort of abilities that God has given me the ability to do, and certain strengths I'm somewhat decent compared to other people I know. And it gives me an outlet for those things. And it's enjoyable to find ways to engage with those aspects of your personality, of your ability, of your giftings, of your talents, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. That's a part of what disc golf does as well. It's good exercise as well. I enjoyed disc golf so much that on Sunday when it was like 6 degrees, I went out and played disc golf.
Where?
Mesker Woods. Wow. Yes, there's two courses over at Mesker. I went and played the Woods course because I felt like it'd be less windy. Yes. And it was. And after about 5 holes, I had warmed up from all the walking. It's a lot of up and down hills. Yeah. And felt great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What time of day did you do this?
Middle of the day.
Okay, sure.
Like 2:00. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it actually did get up to 8 degrees. That's what my phone told me it was when I finished. Okay. 8 degrees. And so, but it's a fun thing. I think
Sunday you did this?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what I was doing on Sunday at 2 p.m. Oh, that's easy. I was playing StarCraft. So here we are.
We were both doing our number one thing on Sunday.
Playing StarCraft with my friend Matt Hollander. There you go.
Yeah. And so I think this is a good thing to just engage with a little bit, because hobbies, leisure, time of rest and these kinds of things are they are important for us as human beings, but even as believers. I've heard stories of different well-known pastors and theologians who, many of them die young because they just pour everything they have into their study, into their writing, into their ministry. And man, I there's a lot to be admired there.
Yeah.
I definitely think so. But I also think there's something to this idea of leisure and rest and even self-care, not to use a buzzword, but that's worthwhile.
Right.
And that's important.
And I mean, now that you brought that word up, one of the most helpful phrases concerning what I would call a strange idea of self-care, because most of what the world talks about when I hear them talking about self-care right now is kind of excuses to take more time off, to be more passive. And that's a big, broad generalization, but all I'm saying by that is to go, labor produces leisure is what we are given in the scriptures to help us to see a good rhythm for our lives. And God then does say, yes, work is primary, rest is secondary. Well, yeah, I mean, 6 days a week you shall labor, 1 day a week you shall rest. And I mean, there are things that are set out that he then teaches the Israelites. And this you see as a pattern throughout the Bible, right? That there are hints around here that say, we were talking about some of these things beforehand, that there in 1 Timothy it says, hey, look, physical training is of some value.
Yeah.
But godliness has value for all things.
Yeah.
And you see this sprinkled throughout there. But just like in every situation, because of the way each of us have a makeup, we have temptations to major on minors.
Yeah.
And as human beings, we have a temptation to major on minors in this regard. That, well, these things were given to us, hobbies. You used the term before we started. Why were they given to us? Common grace.
Yep.
So that, I mean, it literally, according to our reading of the scripture, God sneaks little presents all over the place. And when you turn up that rock and you go, my gosh, I never thought I would enjoy tennis. I never thought I would enjoy chess. Now, you could put a whole bunch of other things in here. That is God peeking at you going, yeah, but I want you to be fulfilled. And what even God is doing right now in our topsy-turvy world where, I mean, part of being connected across the world means we've been exposed to hobbies that are from every culture that's ever existed, especially cultures that are happening right now. Well, that means there's all these things we could be doing. And I do believe that God wants those to be there because, yes, he does know we need rest and we need joy. We need things every day to make us go, there's probably other things out there that I would absolutely love to do. Yes, there are. Absolutely there are. And that is because God is that good.
Yeah.
And if you wonder, after all of the work that we have here on this earth, what's coming in the kingdom of heaven is all of this rest and more. And that is something to look forward to. And so this is, leisure is important.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. The author of Ecclesiastes says in chapter 3 that for everything there is a season.
Right.
And then he goes through a whole list of things, including mourning, including rejoicing, including dancing. Like there's all these different things that it's like, hey, for everything there is a season. And that includes leisure. That includes hobbies. They are not just a waste of time.
Right?
Yeah, they're not accidents. That's
Yeah.
right. They are gifts from God to be enjoyed. And we should enjoy them in their proper place and proper context.
Right, and even that idea, I mean, I'm the kind of guy who likes to look at things and draw firm lines. When does it become a waste of time? Well, look, everything has, this is temperance. Everything has its limit. Yeah. You are a mature enough believer, and you have enough self-control to go, I have played enough holes of disc golf. I've spent enough time away from my family. I've been here. I have a sense. I've been here long enough. This has had its time. And now I'm going to go back and do the other things that God has for me. Yeah. And that's good. And that's what we have to be looking for, because it becomes unfaithfulness when you go, I sense a voice telling me it's time. I don't care about that voice. I want to listen to my own voice and do my own thing. Or wait, do whatever these other voices that tell me, don't worry about all those responsibilities. Don't worry about all output. And there is a rhythm to life. I mean, the Bible says that the Holy Spirit convicts the whole world in regard to sin and righteousness and judgment, and he's working through even these things to teach us. We're so blind, we don't even know what the common graces are in our day-by-day life,
Right.
but we can, through maturity, get there and find the rhythm that we ought to have. And that's these three, I think, are, for both of us, some of the primary ways that God has taught us about joy, taught us about the right rhythm of life, and continues to do that.
Yep, that's right. Amen. Well, hey, I don't have anything more to add. Do you have anything more to add?
I don't.
All righty. Well, there you have it on hobbies and what their role is for believers. This has been Empires of the Future.
And we'll see you in the future.